Hey, Duane, how are you?
Good. How are you two? And probably Crystal coming in.
Hey, Adrian.
I have to say,
And
Duane, your
yeah.
moustache is fundamentally a lot more impressive than mine is.
Yours is new though, right?
Yeah, it's just started. I'm doing a Movember thingy. Do you have that over there? No,
I
not being.
can't, but if I could, I wouldn't.
I was going to say, it's not about being in touch, dear. It's,
Yeah.
Duane, is your MIDI keyboard still close to your computer?
Not this one.
So you're not going to sing or play us a song like Carl
No.
does in his presentation?
No. I actually thought about creating a little theme song, putting something together, GarageBand. The reports, I think, is one of the things that really sold me on Microsoft Access, way back, 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago, was the reports were just fantastic. I remember sitting down at a summit. It was at a lunch, and so a number of the softies were kind of scattered around, sitting at tables and talking, and this had to have been 15 years ago. And the guy that came and sat down at our table and was talking to us was the guy who kind of authored the reporting system within Microsoft Access, and just kind of blew me away that, here's the guy, here's the brain behind the Access reporting. It was pretty cool.
So welcome to Access Lunchtime. Our speaker today is Duane Hookom. Duane has a degree in Parks, Recreation, and Leisure Studies, but he discovered database programming in the early 1980s and started with BASIC and DBase, and then began working with Access about version 1.1 30 years ago. He used to be employed by Nestle and was awarded the MVP award. How long were you an MVP?
15 years.
15 years MVP. And then he's retired since 2021, so fairly recently, but still loves to program databases. So thanks for joining us, Duane. And go ahead and share screen and then take it away.
Thanks, Maria. The main topic is creating a table of contents in an Access report. The specification that I had was to create this table of contents, within a report. So it's embedded in a report. They're typically someplace at the beginning. It has to be dynamic in that as your data changes or your filtering of your data or report properties change, that it can handle that, such as if you go in and adjust the height of the detail section or a header or anything like that, the table of contents is still going to work without changing any kind of code or anything like that. So it requires no manual updating or maintenance from users or anybody else. It should be fairly fast rendering and and then also easy to implement and use. So those were kind of the specifications that I had. And the difficulties with that is that the table of contents is not static. If we do change the filtering, and there are some of our columns, like if you're doing a class catalog with a long description, kind of a memo field or something, and you get some word wrap, your changes are going to be made to the format, and you're going to maybe increase in pages, and things are really going to change on you. And then again, also changing the heights of sections, making them taller or shorter or whatever, or other kind of changes in design. Those kinds of things, they're not static. They just keep changing. And one of the other difficulties is that generating the table of contents really requires, building that table of contents as the report is rendered. And typically, once the table is generated, it's really too late to place that into the report. So what I did, I searched, Googled, and whatever to find different solutions. And some of them that I found were to create two reports and you send to PDF, and then you stitch together, or not. You just print two separate reports. And, that requires some PDF editing and a little more advanced code that typical, users or newer developers are probably just not going to want to tackle. Helen Fedema, who I think, most of us kind of are familiar with her work. She uses custom database properties and then Microsoft Word features and automation, things like that. It's nice, but again, it is very complex. I attempted some other things within the report to use like me.print, with a record set, so that as it's doing the print event of the page that contains the table of contents, to use a me.print. Crystal has a lot of examples of that. I've used it in the past for different things, but bottom line is that's too late. Trying to do a me.print and then print out that table of contents from a record set, that didn't work. And I tried repaint, requery, repull my hair out, all of that. Nothing seemed to work for me. So here we go. What I did is initially you create a table to store the headings and the page. So it's a one-time activity of creating whatever your category or heading value and then a numeric page value. Then you create a table of contents subreport and insert it into the main report. Make sure that your table of contents doesn't affect the number of pages. By putting it in there, and if it is allowed to grow as it's rendering within your report, that's something we really don't want. Then you add code to the report. Typically on the onOpen event of the report, you check the OpenArgs and either trigger the creation of the table of contents or not. And then in the group header on print, you have code to insert a record into the table of contents so that as a record, a new category, a new heading section is printing, it adds a record to the table of contents with the header title and the page number. And then you can create a form with the code to print the report. The first thing that is done in that code, and this is the whole trick, is you create a sacrificial PDF while generating the table of contents. And then the second section of the code is you actually do a print preview without generating a new table of contents because you've generated it already with a PDF. So let me just go into the Access database. What I have here, and I'll just show the relationships. This is data that I pulled off of a website that has just a ton of data sources. I'm kind of assuming they're in the public domain. They're available for download in CVS or other formats. And it took a bit of massaging to get over my OCD when it comes to normalization and such. But anyhow, in this we have our main table is a ratings table. This is a ratings of movies from the date that those movies were released. So we have our movies. And then the movies are part of a genre. A movie can have multiple genre. It can be both an action and a thriller or whatever. And then you have ratings. And so you have a user ID, the movie ID, and then the numeric rating. Okay. So I have some basic explanation on the main form, which I pretty much have gone over. It does tell you that the data was downloaded from Kaggle.com. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but I was just looking for some data to kind of create an example of this report. So that's basically where I found it. Every movie has a year. So if you're looking for recent films, I think 2018 was the most recent year in here. We only really want to look at movies from 2010 to 2018. And then also there's the maximum number of ratings. And so you might want something like when you look at Amazon to buy something, one of the things I always look at is the rating and then the number of ratings that it has. If it only has 2 or 3, I would take any rating with a grain of salt. I've just set up a drop down with some values in here to say, okay, I want a minimum of 25 ratings for these movies that are going to appear. And then I'm going to click report with the table of contents. There was a brief flash, I think you saw it, and what it was doing there, it was creating the PDF version. As it was creating the PDF is when it generated the table of contents. Once the PDF is generated, then it does a print preview. So this is our table of contents, which we can look at here. And we can see. Okay. And that appears here. And this is like a totals query behind the subreport. It gives the min and the max page numbers for the different genre. Let's look at 4 pages. So in order to get the from and the to page is I had the header repeat on each page. That way I get every page. That's basically all there is to it, other than we'll take a look at some code. And let's look at this. Okay. When the button is clicked, we basically have some simple, open the report kind of stuff. And I create the sacrificial PDF in the same folder as the application is in. So I take the current DB and use the in-string reverse to find the backslash, and then take my string report name, stick it in there with a PDF. So that's my PDF name. I find if there's already one out there, then delete it. I tried doing an application.echo false, which didn't do anything for me, to try to get rid of that little flash of the dialog box. I'm sure there's a way, and I'm sure somebody on this call can probably tell us exactly how to do that, but to me it was like, okay, this is going to add some complexity that I wanted to really kind of keep this simple. So I do a command OutputTo the report, and the format is AC format PDF, and then my file name. Okay. And then I basically kill it again if it's there. So, and then I tried the application echo true. It's like, okay, but that didn't do anything for me. And then finally, I just opened the report in the AC preview. This time I add OpenArgs of no table of contents, which is basically the switch that determines if I'm going to redo that table of contents or not. I didn't really find a way to do the do command.outputTo of the report with an OpenArgs, so it was simpler to just put it, and so that by default, when the report opens, it generates a table of contents. So when I open it in the print preview, that's when I say, oh, no, I don't want a table of contents. So the actual report is, there isn't a whole lot of code in there. Okay, so on the report open, here's where I check the OpenArgs to see if it's no table of contents. And I set this kind of global variable, booRebuildTable either to false or true. And if it's true, then I'll delete from the table of contents. Okay, and then as each group header is printed, I have a couple variables, the genre and the page, and then if rebuild table of contents, then I do current DB execute insert into. In my earlier version of this, I only had the beginning page in the table of contents. And I thought, well, so I used a decount, which to basically to see, oh, that genre or that category or heading, we already have our first page of that. So we really don't need to add another record. And then I was thinking, well, how do I make this a little bit more efficient? And I thought, well, decount, doing multiple decounts to me isn't the most efficient way of doing things. And so I thought, well, I'll just insert the next page, whatever page we're on. So I have multiple pages in there. So I don't have to worry about the decount. Okay, so that's pretty much the code, everything, and then we'll just look at the design view of the actual report. The actual report has, in the report header section, is where I put the table of contents. Now that could be on page 2, and notice I did put at the bottom of the report header section, I put a page break in there. I wanted the table of contents to be the last thing on that page and kind of fill it up. So, and within that table of contents, I have, let me double click on here. A couple of things I did is, if you notice in the table of contents, there's the little dots, leaders, between the genre and the page number. So what I did on the genre, on that particular text box, is I added 300 periods to it so that it fills out with periods. On the pages is I did something similar. It's right aligned, but I took a string of 20 periods, could be more or whatever, and then said if the from page is not the to page, then put the from page. So this is like, the min and max of the pages and from the query. Then put the from page and a hyphen and then the to page. Otherwise, just put the beginning page, the from page, in there. If you were to look at the, let's see if we can, we'll just, I don't know if this is going to go. It's probably going to go away, the table of contents, if I just view it without the OpenArgs. Then in my header, here's where I run the event code to do in the on-print to, create the table of contents. The rest of it's all pretty much standard stuff. One of the things that, and I've noticed some questions within the Microsoft Access reports where they need aggregated values as well as detailed values, like say within the headings or group and stuff. And for a lot of those kinds of things, we can simply do group totals, put in a text box with a sum or an average or something like that. In this one, I wanted to get the average rating and the count of ratings. And I needed to kind of generate that because of being able to filter by the minimum number of ratings. I probably could have had another where the average rating is above 3 or something like that. So what I did is in my record source, I had this query where I did a group by in the movie ID and then did an average and a count so that I had that in my record source for the report. So again, to see it all work, let's change this to, let's generate a few more pages. So if we go down to number of ratings, set that to 5. So we generated like 35 pages, which was really pretty quick. So we get the flash. And then if we really zoom in here, we should be able to see, oops. If you notice here, you can kind of see where the dots don't really align because most of these up to here are appended on to the genre. And then these kind of over here to the right side, they're part of the page of pages kind of thing. So, but it's not hardly noticeable when you take a look at it. So. And let's just go back to here. And there are some limitations and opportunities with doing it this way. One of the limitations is that it's basically a kind of designed for a single page table of contents or predetermined multiple pages. You could have set it up for 2 pages or just the 1 page. You get that brief flash of that printing dialog, and like I say, I'm sure that there's something that can be done on that. In its current form, it doesn't support like a hierarchy, but it could. So let's say that this was a list of classes at a university where you might have departments down to classes offered within a department down to some kind of a specialty, and you want to put both the department and the specialty in the table of contents. You should be able to do basically kind of the same kind of code, but you would insert records at the most detailed level, grabbing both the upper levels of the hierarchy. And the code that I did really wasn't global. I've seen some examples where you send the report and you send some objects and stuff into kind of a generic module. If I was going to create an application that had multiple reports or table of contents, let's say if you had employees and projects and you wanted to have this kind of report and that kind of report both with a table of contents, I might try to make it a little bit more generic so that, you know, the code, you'd maybe put a function within an event procedure or something rather than, hard coding kind of things in there. Within the report, page 1 is page 1, and a lot of times you'll see where your report heading and your table of contents, they might be sections or something prior to the actual report page's beginning. So your actual first page of data would have page 1, and I think we're all smart enough to kind of work around that by either adding or subtracting or something like that. So there are some other opportunities here is to create the multi-level. I had my original PowerPoint adding the ending pages. That would be the from and the to, and I kind of did that. And then after I did it, I realized that if you really look in order, the table of contents, it's pretty easy to determine what the last page would be. So, although this would tell you if it carries over to the next page or not. So, just doesn't have a whole lot of value. And then, I think you could also, if you put in some code and had some keywords that you wanted to search on and include in an index, I think you could use something similar to build like an index. So that would be probably a multi-column report that would, of course, go at the end of the report. You could create kind of an index for it there. So I guess I'd like to maybe just throw it open to questions, and I think we have some stuff in the chat. I don't know. Maria, have you been watching that for me?
I'm not sure they're really questions,
okay.
Although there definitely was a question about the flashes, and no one has really come up with a definitive way to get rid of that. Jim Dettman did send a link to an article on that using a Windows API to minimize that. Is that Dev Ash's method, Jim?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, and apparently in some cases that helps, but not in all cases. If anyone else has any other ideas about that, let us know. There's somebody, let's see, comments that they would love, oh, that was Jim, would love to see Microsoft add as a feature to suppress the printing on that. Yeah. Anyone else want to talk about that issue?
Yeah, I did a bit of work on it a couple of weeks ago, about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Is it Neil?
Yeah, it's Neil speaking. Okay. Yeah, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I had a situation where I had to mass produce PDFs, and basically I had to produce hundreds of PDFs in a loop, and each one only took about a second, but the whole process takes a couple of minutes to generate several hundred PDFs. So I put up a progress bar. I've got a standard progress bar that I use, and it was very irritating that every time you output to, you get this printing dialog. So I looked into it. I saw Dev's code. I looked on the internet, searched Google Land, and found all the various issues. And the problem is that it is actually inherently inside the printing process that Access uses. I don't think it's Access's fault necessarily. It's a very old carryover that's buried somewhere deep in Access, and it's a dialog you can't do anything about. What Dev's code does, I think, it runs a timer. It looks for the actual window. When it sees it, it grabs it and minimizes it, but you still get the flash. The way I resolved it was the flash was coming up on top of my progress bar, which was ruining my progress bar, which is really quite sort of visual. And I got around it for now by adding a keep on top to my progress bar. So I set it as topmost window, and therefore it's flashing underneath my progress bar, which is a big improvement. It also means they can't see the cancel, but you've still got this sort of flashing because my progress bar is a little bit smaller than the dialog. So there's two solutions. One, I could make my progress bar a bit bigger, or the other that I was toying with but haven't implemented was when I put up my progress bar, I was going to get it to screen grab a sort of 2-inch border around it from the application underneath and make it part of its own window. So effectively it did a freeze screen of the user's application underneath the progress bar, so the thing would be flashing out of sight. I haven't implemented that yet, but I'm sure I will next time I have the opportunity to play with it.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I kind of figured somebody would have a workaround, and Dev had amazing, has almost everything. He was, between him and Stephen Lebans, I mean, it's like those guys were way out of the box, brilliant. So, but yeah, to me,
the big advantage with devs will be that although you will get the flash, it will always be very small. Yeah. And if you don't grab it and minimize it, it's going to be as big as it takes to render whatever you're rendering.
Yeah, yeah.
Neil, you mentioned that one of the problems was it hid the cancel button. I was just going to suggest that you could add a cancel button of your own onto your progress bar.
Oh, no, I have. And in fact, I wanted to, I have got a cancel on my progress bar. A lot of the users, they're concerned that they don't want the report cancelable. But mine was, I was in a loop of 100. My progress bar offers a cancel anyway. I handle that cancel on there. So as I say, from my point of view, hiding the fact that there is a cancel on that dialog under my progress bar by doing a Windows on top has actually improved the situation, but you have still got this thing flashing underneath your progress bar. The progress bar looks quite good because it's now nice and stable and the flashing's going on underneath it. But it would be nice just to get rid of that flashing, and I might revisit it.
Such a clever way to look at this. And Duane, you have so many clever tricks and stuff, the way you do things. This is a great presentation. And also it's pronounced Dave, not Dev, according to our version.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, good. I did have another little thing prepared, and again, it's not a full going into all the code kind of a thing. And it's something it's really, really old school. It was before I ever worked for Nestle, and I don't know if we wanted to. We've got almost a half an hour left if we wanted to.
Before you do that, Duane, there was also some discussion or mention in the chat. I think it's probably worth a little bit of discussion at least.
Sure.
Is, I know you touched on the limits on the page one and the different levels and that kind of stuff. But a couple different people, I think I saw Dale pop in and maybe one other, talked about how that they have handled those. Would anyone want to say that out loud? Because our chat's wonderful, but people who get the recording don't get the benefit of the chat.
I saw, was it Dale or Jim? Or both, possibly. You produce the table of contents before the report that you actually show. So you already know with the table of contents what it's like before you start printing the report. So when you open the report part, you already know how many pages the TOC has produced. You just add that to page number on one of the pages when you open.
Good. Yeah, that would resolve some of my issues. Thanks.
There was more, I think it was Jim, said that you could be even more clever about that with having multiple reports with a TOC that handled all of them by doing similar thing, but you'd have to be a little bit more involved with the logic then. But there's a great deal you can do by just adding the number that you already know you need to add before at the point when it becomes necessary. Yeah,
I would imagine the table of contents. I mean, the whole subreport is going to grow. But bottom line is that, the details section, you're going to know how much it's going to grow. You should be able to calculate that based on the number of records in there in its record source. So if it did take more than one page, you could create a variable for pages in table of contents and then use that with your page number. So yeah, that's cool.
I was interested to see your from and to bit, Duane. I think you ended up with the right decision. I mean, most table of contents I see just have the starting page, right? And you kind of just know that if you have 2 items starting on page 3, then the first item doesn't take up the whole page or whatever. And if the next topic starts on page 4, then you know that the other one either takes up all of 3 or goes over into 4 a little bit. You just, I think people kind of logically read that into just the start numbers. So I think that's keeps it simpler, you know.
I think it's great that it was illustrated, because a lot of these presentations, they're not, this is how to do these things. It's more throwing up a number of ideas, because other people have done similar things as we were discussing before. But this is some ideas that Duane's showing and illustrating that can be used elsewhere. They can even be fitted into other things that people are doing. So I think the idea of showing you can do a from to as well, even if you don't want to use it necessarily. And I love that bit with the dots. I was impressed with that.
I think that was I call them my bathroom ideas. It's probably in the shower thinking, what am I going to do? And it's like, I think I can do this. And then if I do write a line on the pages, is that going to like force it? And it's like, that's
in the bathroom, force it. Huh?
No, I was in the shower.
Yeah, but I think
it works either way.
TMI.
Yeah, true.
I can see the 2 from being quite useful for people who don't want to print the whole report. They just want to print pages 2 to 3.
Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, I was just going to say that while it might not be as needed to display on a table of contents, that kind of thing could certainly be useful in other areas if you were doing something else with that table of content.
Yeah, the only thing I didn't really show is, and I could have easily, is to go into the design of the report, choose some parameters to print it, and then go into the design of the report, like double the height of the details section, and then just run it again, and it would display or show how just automatically handles more pages. The table of contents is updated for that. So whenever I'm developing, it's like I don't want to have to go back in and do any design changes or anything like that for the most part. But when something does change, they want to change and put some additional information in the details section and make it a little bit taller. We don't have to modify any code. One of my objectives is to not modify code if at all possible.
Makes it much more maintainable that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would offer, since you mentioned, Marie, that our chat isn't visible to anybody who's viewing the video, that what I described is one of my clients has an annual report that ends up being somewhere between 275 and 300 or so pages, with basically generally 80 different reports, as well as section headers and subsection headers in the report. And the way I went around that, what got around that basically is I built a tree view hierarchy structure so that they could define, where each report fell within the overall structure. And it's got little checkboxes so they can identify which elements they want to print during any given print process. And then what it does is it just goes out and creates each of the pages or multiple page sections of the report as individual PDFs, and then stitches those PDF files together using, I think it's PDF TK. I don't remember for sure, but one of the PDF tools that allows you to basically concatenate PDF files together. And as each one of those PDFs is created, it says, okay, this is how many pages are here, which then goes back to the main table and says, okay, this is what page this particular report begins on. And similar to you all, it has the same problem with the OutputTo pop-up that shows up. The whole report only takes maybe 5 to 10 minutes to print and to stitch that PDF together. It's pretty neat, but I don't have the ability to preview the PDF. I guess I could install a web control in a form and let them preview the PDF inside the web control, but it basically just builds the PDF and then tacks the table of contents onto the front of it when it's done doing it that way. So that's another way. And that's probably sounds very similar to what Neil may have been doing when he was generating the large number of individual PDFs that he was doing.
Yeah, and that's very interesting. And I think a great way to do it, especially given that you had both two problems, right? You just didn't need the table of contents. You also were concatenating optionally at one time different reports together.
Maria, just as it's here and we've just had the comment about this chat not being available, I just want to read the last paragraph from Neil Sargent's thing, which I think is very relevant. When I apply keep on top to the progress bar, it is not simply modal and pop-up, as it already was those. You need to call the API SetWindowLong to set the topmost property of the window. So I thought that was worth getting in the recording.
Yeah, and we can get a copy of the chat and Crystal can piece in important parts, which I don't know if you routinely do that, Crystal, or no.
I think I'd rather have Adrian.
Yeah,
they really are.
I can clarify it if you like. Someone said on the chat, make your progress bar modal and pop-up. The problem is that flashing dialog box is a Windows dialog box. It's not owned by the application. So what happens is if you're in Excel and you put screen updating equals false, or if you're in Word and you tell it you don't want updates, or if you're in Access and you say echo false, or to turn off these things, all they do is stop your application from being updated, and that Windows dialog in Windows just carries on regardless. So all these attempts to make it go away, that's why they've failed, and why Dave Ashish's solution of actually grabbing it and minimizing it was one of the best solutions out there. It's because it's actually a Windows thing. But if what you do is you actually modify your own pop-up windows by getting its handle and calling SetWindowLong, I've forgotten the exact, I think it's called the topmost property. It tells Windows that window must be the top hierarchy on the whole desktop, not just your application. And so it takes priority that it hovers above the actual cancel dialog itself, which is coming from the Windows application. And so that makes it flash underneath your progress bar instead of on top of it.
Great to know. Yeah. I did just post a link to a zip file that's on our Access User Group's website that has the the PowerPoint presentation that Duane's done today and some databases. Do you want to go ahead and continue? Is 15 minutes enough to get into your other piece, Duane, or shall we chat about other things?
Yeah, I think I'll just, just so they have an idea of what it is.
Okay.
So let me go here to share. And we'll just choose that one.
Oh, Duane, before you totally get off the other one, I just got to say I loved your table of contents.
Yeah, me too.
Well, you got to try to spice things up just a little bit. So the other thing is basically, and this is one of my clients way back. I think it was, if you look at some of the dates and the objects in this one, they're like 2003, I believe. So, we're talking 19 years ago. No, had it been more than that, because was prior to working for Nestle for 20 years, and I've been retired for over a year. So, but they wanted to build a user interface for creating kind of custom queries or reports. They wanted to be able to have fields, totals possibly, filtering enabled on it, generic, really easy to implement, ability to export the results to Excel or other formats. So bottom line is they didn't want users in the application creating a bunch of queries in the database in the front end. So all the selections of columns and fields were from dropdowns. It allows the users to select and modify previous queries or reports that they built. Easy combo box selections and some minimal error detection and handling, which, is not probably my forte, but I'll try to put it in. So I created basically a system of like 2 tables and a number of forms that you see, 7 forms on this screen. You import those into your Access application, and then you build these master queries. And a master query just combines multiple tables and provides, instead of the primary key numbers, it provides the actual text or titles. And so you can kind of create whatever master queries you want. The only thing is they have to begin with a less than sign, because that's kind of critical in here. So you basically import those in, you create your master queries, you build some sample reports, and you do a little training and you deploy. And so this is a basic example of kind of what it looks like, and I'll just go into it and real quickly. And maybe some of you have seen this. I have that table query fields and source. So your source is like the master table, and then the fields are the fields that are selected within that. So it's fairly normalized. So these are my master, and then it tells what my source query is and when it was created and created, who was created by. And I'll just click on, we have suppliers and products. This is North Winds kinds of stuff. One of the key things here is you can select your top drop down is from your MSysObjects, and it says, hey, show me all the query names that begin with a less than sign. So here are the master queries that were created by the developer. You can give a report a name, it shows what the author is, the date, and then basically these drop downs are of the field type. And I don't know if anybody has, used that very much, but if I quickly look at the design view, we'll click on that. And the data from that is a field list, which is really kind of cool. And my field list depends on my data source. It goes to the data source, and so I have code that basically says, oh, this field list comes from this particular query data source. I give them the ability to sort, and this basically gives you the sorting of the query, and then I also do some operations. I give them the ability to do like a between or a like or equals or not equals, those kinds of things. The show data box, checkbox here, what that does is it creates a drop-down of all of the available data. I only would use that when it's a small amount. If you have like a dates between something, you may have thousands and thousands of dates, which would really make this drop down kind of hard to manage. So this one, I'm surprised it should, since I don't have a between on here, it has some values in there anyhow. But you click on run the report, and it takes and builds that, dynamically builds the query in the code. And then that query is displayed in this form. And then you have the ability to send this to a number of different file formats. And this would be to my desktop, and then it allows me to start the application. So if I click on send, it's sending it to Excel. Now this is that same data in Excel. And working where I did, at Nestle, everybody wants their data in Excel. They want to be able to make modifications, do whatever they want, or further reporting and stuff. So it sends it right out to Excel with a little bit of code. So one of the key takeaways here, it's a little bit unique, is that this subform, what I do in code, and let's just take a look at the onOpen. Let's see. In the onOpen, I send in an OpenArgs with the query name. What I do is I set the me subform, that's the name of the subform, pretty original, and I set the source object to query.me.openargs. So that query is, the result of building my SQL statement, saving it with a query name, and then I'm setting the source object just to that query. I originally had done a ton of code with some hidden text boxes and making them visible as I kind of loop through the fields of a query or whatever. And then I discovered that, all I have to do is one line of code where I set the source object to the query dot and the query name. The other thing in here that's somewhat unique, to take advantage of all of the available real estate on the form, if it grows, I set the subform, this is the subform control, I set the height and the width based off of the inside height and the inside width, so that bottom line, if I take this and make it smaller, we'll notice that the size of that will change, so we can show more or less. And then the OutputTo, the send button, it just kind of does a select case, and based off of what was selected by the user, it will provide the right output. So I'm going to exit out of here. We'll see if we can find one. Okay, this one's basically for a graph. Notice I have a totals here. So it's opened up a new column, or it makes it visible, and that's our group by, or sum, or count, or whatever we want. And then we can click on the run report query, and then this one I'll just send it to a graph. And this is pretty primitive. I just had more fun working with this than anything else, just to set the type of graph it is. And everybody loves pie charts, and you can put in a graph title here and it'll update, turn legend on and off on the graph. So pretty simple. So within the slideshow PowerPoint, so again, the technical bits on here is to save your master queries, beginning with a less than sign. It uses a field list for the row source type with the row source of the master query. And then it builds a SQL statement. It displays the results on that subform with the source object, like query.myQueryName. It'll adjust the size of that subform to fit the screen resolution. So if you have more columns, and it'll spread out to fit the screen. I've also used this where I modified the code, or maybe had an option that would determine, okay, this is a SQL Server table, and where it would modify a pass-through query, because it's very, very fast when you're doing a pass-through query to a SQL Server. So if you set it up and use the SQL Server syntax versus the Microsoft Access, and like on the between and the delimiters and stuff like that. So, that's kind of what I had on that. And again, I would throw that open to any kind of questions people might have on it or anything. Maybe you've seen it. It's been on my access.hookom.net for a long time, I think.
So yeah, if you have questions, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask, or put them in the chat. Is one, can you create calculated values like a price times quantity, or do you do that in your master query?
I would do it in the master query. Building the master query takes some of the mystery out for the users that might not understand exactly the data structures and field names. None of my field names I would want to expose to my users. They all have my naming convention, and so this allows you to create aliases, create calculated columns. If you really need the month and the year as separate columns, you could create that in your master query. You can do some, I have played around with some expressions and such probably within the criteria, where I compare it to another field. And for the most part, those kinds of things that got a little bit more complex, still worked. And, one of the drawbacks to this too is that if you get somebody who really doesn't understand data types, and if they have a numeric field or a date field and they put in something that just doesn't resolve, I don't have real clear error handling. But on the other hand, if you allow them to build their own queries, the news groups are full of issues with just simple queries too. So, but bottom line is that if they have a problem with one, you can basically open it up. It shows you their saved query or their setup on it, and you can go look at it and create it. And then basically once you've kind of created it, I have this my query here, and that's what I work with. And so, you can view the SQL of my query for, to be able to troubleshoot it.
So related question, if you're dealing with a access to access database where they have a back end, are these tables with the queries in it typically on the local front end, or are they shared? Are they on the back?
I create them as shared. I'll put them on,
Okay.
SQL Server or in the Access database, so that it's kind of up to you. But if you send out a new front end, you don't want to have to worry about
Right.
importing, exporting all of that, and sometimes I will. On the initial page where you kind of go in and select your report, I'll have some filtering on there that says, show me my reports, or maybe by default, show my report. And I think I maybe had a ability to clone reports. You can change it. But, the nice thing is if you go in and you change a date range or any other kind of filtering, you can, basically you're working with the same report definition. All you're doing is changing data, in your, master or your child table. And
do you allow them to edit those, like add rows to the filters and stuff though, or no?
Yeah, they can add as many columns as they want within the creating their report. Let me just.
Do you ever run into problems where like someone sets up a report and then someone else modifies it and then the other person's report is gone, that kind of thing? Or
that can happen. That can certainly happen, and that's where you could potentially only show the reports they've created and some sample ones, or you could easily set up a field within the report, within the source, which is kind of the master table, and have a checkbox that says private. Right. And so that when you display this to a user that is not the editor or the creator of the report, it's not going to show it. So yeah, that'd be a great idea. You could do that.
Okay.
But yeah, so if we look at this, I can say, okay, my reorder level, my city state. Yeah, so I can add as many columns in here as I want. and it's, so what we're seeing in the detail, this is a form with a subform. The subform is basically just showing you the fields that are, used to generate your SQL statement. And again, I can show totals or not, and this stuff is all stored with the master table. These are all kind of the details or the fields that are chose.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your presentation today. Before I open it up just to general discussion, I did want to get in case other people have to go, because we are just past our 1 hour time limit, that as far as upcoming topics, I do have some topics for January and February lined up with speakers, but at the moment, I do not have a November 29th or December 27th speaker. So if there's anything that you would like to speak on, please feel free to let me know, and I would be happy to have you. Or a specific topic that you would love. I know I've had requests for things like security. I'm still working on getting somebody to speak on that. So I do know about that one, but if you have any other specific topics that you would love to hear about and don't feel comfortable speaking yourself, let me know that as well.
So clever, both of your presentations. Thanks, Duane. I do have a question about your table of contents presentation. What is the reason to recreate and delete the PDF file after it's already deleted?
I just want to make sure it's dead. I really don't, if something were to go wrong in deleting it after you initially create it, I just want to make sure it's gone. I could get rid of one line of code in there if I wanted to.
I always take that approach, Duane, belt and braces. Delete it before in case something not worked before. Delete it afterwards because you're tidy. Yeah.
It's one line of code and basically duplicated. So thanks for the feedback, everybody. And I appreciate the chance to talk. I sit at home alone a lot.
Well, it was great to have you. You did a very nice job. Thank you.
Duane has some really cool stuff posted, and he's had it out there for a long time. But what I really love about this is I love you explaining it, Duane, and how thoroughly you covered everything. It just was logical. It was interesting, and I think you should do more of your tools.
I knew you were going to say that.
We have November and December open.
Yeah. Actually, there is something I wanted to ask about the table of contents. Have you played with a situation where you're using a text box that can grow and you end up with it reformatting and backing up and reapplying a section? I noticed that early on, Adrian said that you should only insert your table of contents if print count equals 1. I actually thought the opposite was true, because I thought the print count was incremented each time the section gets printed or formatted. You get a format count increases because it's had to back up and do that section again. And I would have thought that the last print count was the valid one, because that was the last attempt it did to get it right, which would therefore be the right page.
Let me jump in there quickly, Duane, if I may, because you referred to the print count thing. Halfway through, I realised that probably, I'm not absolutely positive about this, but I think the TOC, the table of contents, is built on when he first runs through the PDF, which he then discards. That's then the size. He then goes on to print the same again, but as part of the report. And at that point, he knows how big the TOC is. He can then add 1 or 2 pages, whatever, to the page number. But it doesn't matter after that whether you go backwards or forward, which you could, the user could be going forward a page, then backward a page, and that would get reprinted with print count being added. But it wouldn't matter because that isn't where they grabs the size and the TOC from.
Yeah.
Does that make sense, Neil?
Exactly. Well
yeah, because
said.
you've basically done a clean run all the way through the report to do the PDF and work out the table of contents.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you were worried about when they were scrolling to and fro in preview mode.
Exactly, because I
was referring more to when Access actually backs up and reprints a section because it didn't fit on the page or because it's got keyed together, and you end up with it attempting to print a section on a page, then it realizes it doesn't fit, realizes it's keyed together, abandons it, and goes on to the next page, and then does it again.
And that can happen in the original. But
I think whatever happens, however much it does that, so long as you grab it each time it goes past, it's always the last one that prevails.
Yeah, I think one of the things that hasn't been brought up would be a potential issue is that the format and the margins and that kind of stuff within a PDF. I'm not sure that they would match up with a user's printer. So, a PDF might have smaller top and bottom margins, but when you print to, a laser printer or something else where you have greater top and bottom margins, that could affect how the report is rendered and which records go on which page. So,
the way I got around that when I did, I said at the beginning that I had done this many years ago. Yeah. That was actually before PDF was invented. And in fact, the way I did that was I actually ran it through the printer driver itself.
Oh.
I told the printer to dump it to Null. So I used the same printer driver as was going to be used in the final run, but threw away the contents effectively.
Wow. That's cool.
That's an alternative way of doing it.
Except for if you do it to print preview, then you can choose your printer. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it would. I think that technique sounds good, Neil. Is there any chance you could post in the chat how you did that? The sort of code that allowed you to say, how do you actually say, print it to this printer, and how do you tell the printer or the driver to say dump it to Null?
I'd have to try and look it up. This was some 1999 code, I think.
Wow, that's older than my code.
Recent then.
No, because what we were doing was we were printing a catalog, and what we were doing was actually using the printer driver of the publisher's actual printer. We didn't even have the printer because we couldn't afford a printer like they used. So we were actually dumping it to a file and sending it to the printer to actually print using proper offset printing. And so we were generating an output file, and so I had the luxury of therefore being able to discard that file and send them the second one. So I think that's where I'm referring to the Null thing.
No, but it's already set up as a Null, is it? Oh, okay. Yeah, so that would be difficult to do on the fly. But I mean, that's a good point to raise, Neil, because sorry to monopolise here, but yeah, those things are possibilities, and you wouldn't get that quite the same way if you were printing to a PDF, as Duane was explaining. The driver for the physical printer takes into account the limitations, how closely it can get to printing to the edge. So if a printer can't print, this is just a random thing, but if a printer can't print within 1 inch, and I'm using that for the Americans here, within 1 inch of the edge, we have stuff that prints closer. PDF will handle it, but when it gets put through the driver for the printer, it'll adjust things in a way that won't be incorporated otherwise.
It might be necessary, if you were encountering that problem, to actually, before you print your PDF, to set up its margins and everything to match those of the final destination printer.
Yeah, but then that's a one-off thing. You can't program that in, can you? That's not something that you can put into an bit of access code.
Yeah, but you know that you're rendering with the default printer or a specific printer, so you can grab you can grab the report formatting properties of the active printer and set them on the PDF, I think, maybe.
Well, you could probably do that, and I might be able to do it. But it's not something you could incorporate into the code. Your earlier suggestion seemed far more practical and usable because it didn't rely on users being printer operators. So, but that's all good. Yeah. Thanks for that.
Okay, everyone. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Special thanks to Duane for your presentation today. It was great to see everybody. And you guys
very well
all
presented, Duane. Thank you.
A great month. Check out some of the other Access user groups. They have topics all month long. We're up to about, 6 groups here. Now, George, you're on. Do you want to say anything about your upcoming meeting, or?
Give me a chance.
Kind of
and I'll talk
frozen
for a while. Sure. Actually, I'm going to do a presentation on a hybrid app with an Access front end, a Power Apps interface, and a Dataverse data storage for Collins European group, Access Europe group.
Oh, fun.
So we did a little run through today, in fact, and I think we worked out the bugs that I'll be able to actually demo it live on the iPhone. My meeting is the next day, Thursday. You can either attend our meeting or catch the video, and we will still start at the same 6:30 Pacific, and I know that's way too late for most people.
We'll catch your recording.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I got to run because I got another meeting.
Thanks, Maria. Thanks for all the
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And well done, Duane.
Thank
See
you. Bye. Thanks for not cutting it off right at 1 o'clock, Maria.
You're welcome.
It's great to have all this extra stuff.
It is.